Uhuru, my name is Halley Murray. I also go by Comic Crowbar for my art and zines. I'm from Boston, and I'm a member of the Uhuru Solidarity Movement since over a year now. And I joined because when I first heard about this movement, it just seemed like a real tangible way to a solution to stop the wars from happening and to stop capitalism and stop this whole oppressive system that's built on slavery and genocide. And I come from a background of anarchism and feminism and think those kinds of politics, but I now, after studying and being in this movement for over a year, I now unite with African internationalism as the political theory to liberate everyone and to obliterate all forms of oppression, including how white women are oppressed within the society. So, next slide. Contradictions I've experienced as a white woman, or whatever gender I am, not really sure. I've been taken advantage of while drunk, had emotionally abusive white male partners, had a gun held to my head by a white male partner, have felt like my body was nothing more than just an object to be used. I've been gaslighted by white men, like emotional abusive words like this, had unwanted sexual advances and force, and I've been socialized since a young girl by rules of monogamy, the female gender role, as this is my place in society, and heteronormativity, that these things are my only options to relate to other human beings. So just deconstructing that and dealing with that. And these experiences have sometimes led me to self-harm. Next slide. So, but despite all these contradictions I experience as a white woman, I'm still of the colonizer nation, because before I'm a woman, I'm a white woman. I'm a white person, a human. As the African National Women's Organization, under the leadership of President Yejide Orinmila, they state, which is a section of the party, they state that there's no such thing as women in general. There are women of the oppressed nation and women of the oppressor nation. And I, as a white person, I am a woman of the oppressor nation. My ancestors came from Europe, committed mass genocide against African and indigenous people to create this white power empire that I, as a white person, benefit from. My ancestors did that. And I've had encounters with the police, and I'm still alive to tell the tale. I'm here to tell you that that happened. No one in my family is in prison, which cannot be said of almost everyone in the African community. Next slide. And in particular, this case would never happen to white girls. Never, ever. Would me as a white, long blonde hair, if you can imagine, me and my two white girlfriends, like, this would just never happen. The same way that killer cops of Pinellas County drowned and murdered Lanaya Miller, Dominique Battle, and Ashanti Butler last year would just never happen. So this is their car that was pushed into the pond and drowned by the police. Next slide. The oppression of African women. When we look at the oppressive conditions that African women experience under colonialism and continue to experience today, it would seem just totally absurd to lump myself into that same category as oppressed women. They experience constant harassment by the police, which leads to the murders of African women, such as Sandra Bland. And when I was doing this presentation, I was looking up this photos of her, and I realized that the mugshot on the right is to be said that that's the real one, and it was taken after she was already dead, and that the police, you know, there's a lot of evidence online. So just discovering that, doing this presentation, I was sick, you know, but this is a daily reality, and that doesn't happen to me. It doesn't happen. Next slide. Continued oppression of African women. African women are the fastest growing prison population in the United States, with a 300% increase over the last 30 years. For example, Corinne Gaines, African warrior, young woman, was terrorized the police by a SWAT team in her house. This picture on the right is a still from the video footage of her filming the SWAT team guy just staring at her with a gun for hours, until eventually he shot her and wounded her child, her 5-year-old child, Cody. Next slide. The African women were the first, African babies were the first stock on the stock market in this country, where African men and women were forced into pens, forced raped to produce babies, little tiny humans that were sold on the market, had a price tag on their head, and sold as slaves for white people who inherited the wealth, and Africans inherited the poverty. Pregnant African women were lynched, their fetuses cut out and kicked around like a ball for white people to play with. Just absolutely horrendous, oppressive conditions. African women have had scientific research on their bodies, slicing them open while they're still alive, which is why science today knows a lot like the gynecology things we know is because of the cutting up of African women's bodies. And other things like colonialist beauty standards, the skin bleaching creams, all these things that just say that white women is the ideal. It's just so oppressive. Next slide. African women's children get stolen by the state. In Missouri, this is for real, a 5-year-old can get arrested with a felony charge. This colonial so-called foster care system, aka kidnapping, snatches African children away from their mothers. And here is pictured Kashinda Olanrewaju, who's the vice president of the African National Women's Organization. This is in London here. She's been in the 17-year-long oppressive battle with the state against this revenge eviction and custody of her son. And they have this, ANWO has this campaign, Arrest CPS, which is brilliant. So there's really no comparison to what I face as a white woman compared to the state-sanctioned oppression and violence that African women experience every day in this country. Next slide. So now I'm going to talk about how the feminist movement, white feminist movement, relates to the Black Power movement. Both major waves of feminism that exist in history were sparked by the struggles for Black liberation. The first wave being African resistance to chattel slavery in the late 1800s, and the second wave was African resistance in the 1960s and the Black Panther Party and the Black Power movement of the time. Next slide. First wave of feminism began with the women's right to vote in 1848 in the United States here, which is, we're on Turtle Island. I forgot to say that, occupied Turtle Island. So in 1948, this was a time when African people were still enslaved. The United States was engaged in a serious imperialism and colonialism around the world, such as stealing half of Mexico at gunpoint. In China, there was the Opium Wars, trying to get them addicted to drugs to, make them dependent and give money to the white empire. This first wave of feminism ended with the 19th Amendment. In 1920, white women had the right to vote. Yay. Meanwhile, lynchings of African men and women were still rampant. So I asked the white feminists of that time, where were the rights of those African women in this feminist so-called women's movement? It just didn't exist. It was opportunistic. Next slide. Sojourner Truth was an African woman, and so white feminism at this time, they appropriated African women's struggles for liberation and took it for themselves, such as Sojourner Truth pictured here. She famously said, "Ain't I a woman?" in this speech at a 1951 women's convention in Ohio. "Ain't I a woman? I work in the mud, I work hard all day. Am I a woman? Am I a human too?" And white women took this slogan for their white feminism and gave nothing back to the African liberation struggle to overturn slavery and colonialism. Next slide. And white women played a major role in the lynchings of African people, in particular African men. Crowds of white people attended the torturings of Africans. Women got the firewood. Women dressed up with their partners and brought their babies in cute little dresses to witness the murdering of Africans. White women would accuse African men of rape. There's so many stories of this. As Penny Hess laid out earlier, they would just say, "Oh, he looked at me, he raped me," and his life would be over. So that power that white women had, that's colonialism. That I'm not in the same boat as an African woman. It's, white women sit on this pedestal. These other pictures here, the Rosewood Massacre in 1923, Rosewood, Florida. This was a thriving African community where an African man was accused of raping a white woman, and a white mob killed 80 African people, destroyed the whole town, just set it on fire, just erased it off the map. And another similar example in the Tulsa Massacre in Oklahoma, 1921, a white mob lynched Africans and destroyed their community. Same story, because of white women are the most dangerous threat to African men. Next slide. White woman admits she lied to instigate the murder of Emmett Till. Emmett Till, pictured here, was a 14-year-old African boy who in 1955 was brutally murdered by white people. And this was instigated by this white woman on the left here, Carolyn Donham. She accused him of flirting, and it wasn't until a couple years ago that she admitted this publicly. She owes reparations. This white woman owes reparations. If you go to the next slide. Yeah, this is what white women do. That woman, he was drowned. You can't even tell it's a person, but this is what happens because of what white women do. Next slide. So Ida B. Wells was an African woman journalist, a writer, and an activist. And this is just a really important document to know of. She compiled a book documenting the lynchings of African people, which was titled Southern horrors, lynch laws in all its phases. Next slide. Rosie was African. Fact. So now we're in the 1940s, where jobs and white imperialism in the United States was like making planes to go to war. This was like the jobs available for women at the time. And the few jobs that were available for African women were just the dirtiest, most low-paying jobs that you could find. And while white women who had the same job got much higher pay, a union, and eternal fame, such as this iconic Rosie the Riveter, which is like, it's still big today, like feminism, we can do it, the strong thing. But then this picture on the left is an African woman doing the same thing. So like, where's her iconic, strong, powerful woman? Like, it's just another example of white women appropriating African women's struggles. And African women always worked the hardest for no pay. So like, come on, next slide. The second wave of white feminism in the 60s, this was when white women fought to have equal power as the white man in the colonial system at the expense of African people, such as gaining a bigger piece of the imperialist pie, being a colonizer like the white man, getting equal jobs in the army, in the military, in the police force, equal opportunity to hold a gun to murder Africans. Like, I don't want that. Like, I don't want that. This was you know, equal positions with, yeah, it was totally opportunistic. And such as Betty Shelby is a current example, this white woman cop who last summer murdered and gunned down Terrence Crutcher. So it's like, she's a white woman, but she owes reparations too. Okay, yeah. So in the 1960s, Black Power and the worldwide fight against colonialism was the main trend in the world. The women's liberation movement of that time is even called that at all is because of the Black liberation movement. They just stole the same word. Revolution was the main trend in China and Vietnam and the so-called Middle East. And the women's liberation movement never addressed colonialism. It was not on their agenda. Next slide. White feminist icon Gloria Steinem was a CIA agent. This is still in the 60s. Yeah, this woman, white woman on the left, is seen still today as like this feminist icon, but she was sent to infiltrate activists and other communist organizations in the 70s to destroy them. And it's like, I just want to draw there's like a line between these two people. Like, they're not on the same page just because they have their fists in the air and their bodies are the same. It's like totally different. And today there's no better example of white feminist opportunism than with Hillary Snaky Clinton. I never was with her. So it's her twin sister here. This woman, this creature called Black children super predators. She stole millions, the Clintons together stole millions of dollars from the people of Haiti, and she's an imperialist. Just because she's a woman, it's like, she still is part of the imperialist system. Next slide. And this can be really seen a lot today, especially with this Trump thing, in these white women's marches, which are opportunistic and imperialist. And I attended the one in Boston, selling this beer, trying to organize other white women to like similar to what I'm doing here. And the march in Boston was even called Boston Women's March for America, literally a pro-America march. So what does that say about the feminist movement? You can see the flags here. And the signs like "Our America cares about everyone." That's a lie. You know, these marches all around the country were fueled by Trump's election and sexism, and white women were personally offended by it. But white women say nothing when Obama has deported over 2 million men, women, and children and dropped 3 bombs per hour in the last 8 years. So where are all these pissed off women when the bombs were dropping on other women and children? Where were they? Where are you, women, white women? They're here. No. Yeah, white feminism is and has always been opportunistic. White women only care about an issue when they're personally affected by it. No comment on the millions of African women today dying in genocide in the Congo, funded by U.S. imperialism. No comment on the drone bombs that kill women and children across Africa. Next slide. And yeah, white women owe reparations to African people. This meme on the left here, Casey made. This is Comrade Casey holding a new article in the Spear, "White Women Owe Reparations to African People." And the picture below it are white women organizing to support Darren Wilson. So those ladies owe reparations. And on here, white women, in big numbers went out to support Trump. White women owe reparations. I owe reparations. Next slide. You know, things like rape culture, so-called patriarchy, and violence against women. Which is where a lot of, you know, what brought me to feminism, like I don't like those things, and feminism that I found seemed like it was doing something. But, you know, being in the Uhuru Solidarity Movement, it's deepened my understanding of where these things come from, because these concepts are not native to Africa. These concepts are not native to Turtle Island, the indigenous cultures. These are ideas that came from Europe. Rape culture came from Europe. It was brought here. It's because of colonialism. Rape was used as a tool of colonial domination. Rape culture was brought here like a disease from Europe, from Europe's colonial assault on Africa and Turtle Island. These things did not exist pre-colonialism. So to end violence against women, we must first address colonialism, which is the root of all oppression everywhere. Reparations as a material thing can be used to obliterate rape culture because it's going after the root. Reparations is a solution to colonialism. Next slide. And this is really so powerful that to really understand, if white women can understand this and all these sectors here, the oppression of white women does not exist in a Black power world. It just doesn't, because Black power liberates all people. You know, I do this, I'm here because I want to get free. I don't want abusive partners anymore. I don't want to be an object. I want to get free, and I want all people everywhere to be free. So that is why I'm in this movement. And I'm calling on all white women everywhere, everyone who's tuning in right now, align yourself with the African Revolution. Join this movement. Don't accept your rights at the expense of colonized people, as we've seen today. White women owe reparations. And we can do that by joining the Uhuru Solidarity Movement. So I call on white women out there to help form the white women sector of the Uhuru Solidarity Movement, to organize other white women like ourselves to come to the understanding of African internationalism and work under the leadership of the African working class. Uhuru.